Okay, I think we are live now. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of Tech Talks with Santosh. And today we have a very special guest because I know, how much NgRx means to me. So we have Brandon Roberts, the maintainer of NgRx maintainer, core team member, and a Google developer expert as well. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here, and we are going to discuss about the journey which Brandon had. So we'll start with how he started into or came into tech, and then how he started with open source, how he became actually the maintainer of NgRx, and also how went to work with the Angular team. So he was like with the Angular team for a long time. I know it because when I started contributing to Angular, the first
Mhm.
PR was reviewed by Brandon as well. I mean, at both the places, right? So NgRx and Angular. So my first PR for both the projects was reviewed by Brandon, and now he works with Narwal. So I mean, pretty excited company to work with. So let's go ahead and get started with the. Okay, so welcome to the show, Brandon, and let's see. So how you started your journey into tech? I mean, how your education, and then how you decided that you want to be part of tech.
Mhm. Yeah, so I've always been into tech, even from when I was like small kid. Like I've always grown up around computers. I think my
Oh,
first computer was let me preface that with saying I'm an old man. My first computer was a Commodore 64, I believe.
oh,
So that I used that mostly to play games, of course, when I was that age, and also to like type things into the because on the Commodore you had to like actually type in commands to like load the games and
mm,
things. So
mm,
that was probably my earliest interaction with using the computer and trying to or typing the commands to tell the computer what to do.
oh,
So yeah, I grew up around computers. I went from, like I said, Commodore 64, then up through. Um, my dad was really big into computers, so he like built computers and things. And of course, me being a kid, I would sit and watch what he did, and then try to learn how to put computers together and fix them and things like that. So all that like contributed to me wanting to get into tech. And I was more or less started out just like wanting to learn computers and build computers, but then I more or less transitioned into software when I got into high school because they
oh,
actually had a class where they taught programming in high school, and it was QBasic. The programming language was QBasic. So
ah,
that was my first real project in high school where I actually started to like code and learn things like that as far as school goes. And I remember the biggest project I had in that class was I wrote a game in QBasic. It was like a basketball game, of course, because I was one of the kids in high school who played sports and worked on computers also.
ah,
uh, so yeah, I wrote a game as a little basketball game where it was just like a floating goal that went up and down, and then you hit the button on your keyboard, and then the guy shoots the shot, and it tells you, based on like the arc of the shot when you hit the button whether the shot was going to go in or not.
ah,
So yeah, that was my journey like in high school, and then once I got out of high school, I went to college, and of
mhm,
course did more programming there. My first stint in college, I didn't really do all that much because I was more interested in just like playing around. I wasn't taking it serious, but I also always loved the programming part of it. If there was any class that I excelled in, it was the programming part because I like sunk all my time into that more than the other things.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I went through college, then came back home and started working and um continued to like go to school and like do web development on the side. And I had
mm,
started doing web development probably like out of high school. And this was before I even knew like, I guess what web development really was. This was back when I was just right clicking on pages, viewing source, and trying to see what was going on the page. So I probably did a lot of that development and debugging like earlier on before I took like formal classes in HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So yeah, continued through high school. Then like I said, was doing web development on the side, and then like my first professional job was as a PHP developer. So I was a backend developer for a long time. So I did PHP when this was back before, back when PHP was like the front end and the back end. Everything was you were writing your HTML in PHP and then serving it up on the client side. So that was how I got started into tech, and I guess the journey goes on from there. But that's more or less like I've always been interested in it and always been trying to do things with tech and people. So that was kind of or at least where I got started before I got into the whole Angular ecosystem.
Okay, that's really great. I mean, I remember the first line of code which I wrote for web was, I think, ASP, active server pages, if you remember. So
Yeah,
it was really.
Yeah. I did some of that too.
Yeah. Okay, that's really nice. Okay, so I mean, from college, then you started with this PHP development, and how you transition into. I mean, so of course you were a backend developer, right? So now coming to the front end. So how you started the front end development? How you actually which programming language you tried to learn, and how it was?
Yeah, like I said, I was doing back end PHP work, which was mostly like building HTML on the back end, and then on the front end we had like a sprinkle of JavaScript here and there. So I would do that, and then of course had more time to experiment outside of work to actually build things with JavaScript and CSS. And so what I would end up like before I started actually doing front end work, I was still like always tinkering. And then I had actually moved from my first job, like as a PHP developer, to another job that was more of a mix of back end and front end. So it was like the app itself was like a hodgepodge of a bunch of different technologies at the time. It was like PHP on the back end, and there was another side of it that was C#, C#.net back end on it, and it was had a front end that was, some of it was vanilla JavaScript, and some of it was a framework back then that was, which I think is still around today. It's called Ext.js or Sencha JS, or the framework that it was. So I was still writing. I was working, I guess, essentially working some on the front end in that job, but like I said, it was still mostly back end work with just kind of tweaks on the front end when necessary to try to get the UI working based on the data that was coming from the back end. So yeah, I did that, and then from there, like I moved from working on that project. It was like a mix of other things, and I did another project that was, it was HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it was like it was like compiled to a native app. So what we were using back then was it was the Titanium framework, I believe. It was like, I guess it's similar to what built on top of Cordova or like PhoneGap, those type of things. It was like another flavor of that, where you could write your app, write your web app, and it would get compiled into an iOS app. But that one was mostly just like jQuery and vanilla JavaScript and using like closures and things like that. So, so yeah, that was more how I got into the front end work. Was I did some on the back end, and I did some on the front end, and then kind of worked my way into that area. Now, where I really got involved with like the Angular ecosystem was, like I said, I moved on to a different job where I was working for it was a government contractor here. So there's like a marketing marketing place in the like the army here or in the government. They have like military marketing, I'll call it. So
Okay.
the game is like a game's called americasarmy.com, America's Army, and the site is at americasarmy.com. You can still go check it out today. But I worked on the back end there, like I said, doing PHP, some front end stuff. But that app was PHP on the back end and AngularJS on the front end. And I had always been interested in learning AngularJS, but never actually got to work with it. I was doing the same thing everybody else does. I went to the AngularJS.org site, and you know the live examples there, and I type in my name and see it change. Changing the other box was because two-way data bindings was all the rage back then. But like I said, past that, it's like I don't know what I'm going to build with AngularJS. Yeah. I don't use it for work. I know we use it, or we were using it at work at the time, but I didn't use it personally. So it was kind of hard to wrap my brain around what I would do with it at the time. So I was doing PHP work, and then I started another, of course, my friend Mike Ryan, who's in the ecosystem also, Angular ecosystem also. He was like the lead developer on the project, lead front end developer on the project at the time. And so he was like lead over AngularJS, did most of the front end work, and actually helped me get involved in doing like transition over to do some AngularJS stuff on that project. So I did that for a while, and actually moved to doing front end work like full time. Doing AngularJS, just because I said that the opportunity came up, and I definitely wanted to get involved with it. So I switched over to doing AngularJS on that project, and I continued to do front end work. That was basically when I left the back end world and started doing AngularJS on the front end. This was, of course, before Angular 2, which what it was called back then, had even gotten released yet.
Nice. I mean, I remember I have to. I think I did my first project in AngularJS in 2015. That's also it was like I had to push, and I had to tell the organization that okay, we will deliver it in 3 months, and eventually we ended up doing it in 6 months. But but I really wanted to work on AngularJS, and they were like, no, we need to use ASP.NET. I was like, okay, let me do it in 3 months. We'll do that. And then eventually 6 months, and it was over. That's nice. So how you got involved with open source contributions?
Yeah. So I had always wanted to get involved in open source, but like my idea of how you got involved was like that you had to be like the best of the best. You can't be coming into people's projects trying to contribute code to theirs unless you have like all your ducks in a row, you got all your things together. So it was a long time before I actually got into open source, even though I was like looking at it from like the outside in. And so my first attempt at submitting a PR to a project, because I was, like I said, PHP developer. Laravel was then and still is big in the PHP community.
Yeah.
And I was trying to submit a PR to a project there that I had used. And I was like, I'm going to do all this work and I'm going to contribute a PR, and then it's going to be great. And I'm going to learn how to do open source, and then they're going to help me. And then so I submitted it, and it was like, great, this is a good change. I don't think we should do this. I'm going to close this PR. Goodbye. And that's kind of, so my first PR in open source was a reject. Which was a good learning opportunity for me on, but I mean, it wasn't that the maintainer of the project was like rude or anything. They just had a different vision for where they wanted the project to be and what that change might have introduced. So that was my first attempt at open source contributions. And so after that, I don't think I submitted anything like relatively quickly after that. But when I really got involved in open source was probably with NgRx, because like I said, at the previous company that I worked at, we we got to experiment a lot with like our stack. Like we were using AngularJS, of course, and then this was around about the time that Angular 2 was in alpha, I guess. And because we could choose whatever stack we wanted, we're like, we're going to start using Angular 2 like now. We're going to try to start building things back with it now and see if we can what we can build with it. And actually, I think we deployed some things to production even with Angular 2 beta code at the time. But in that process of, like I said, being able to experiment and build things with Angular 2, what we ended up doing was building like a wrapper around Redux, where it was similar to what NgRx Story is, but it was an internal project, so we couldn't. Of course, we couldn't open source it because it was like government work and all that, and then there's a lot of red tape that you have to go through there. So we still had it on our internal project. It looked similar to NgRx Store. So me, Mike, and myself looked at the NgRx Store project from Rob, because Rob Warmald is the founder of NgRx. The idea, the vision, the goals, and we thought that that looks pretty similar to what we were looking at wanting to do with our project. So we ended up starting to contribute to, or going. It's like the thing, you go into a project. There's like, these are the things that we need to do. It's like, okay, we know how to do those things. I mean, I'm familiar with Git, and wasn't necessarily familiar with GitHub at the time, but I knew enough to, make another attempt at trying to submit a PR and all that. So, well, I guess that was part of it, but I guess before, also I was in tandem with that. I was working like GitHub issues on the Angular project, not necessarily contributing code or anything, but it was more helping people with the issues. Like I would see issues coming up, be like the first one diving in, like trying to reproduce issues and try to help out there. And I think that was where I actually interacted with Rob first, was in GitHub on the Angular project. Before we got down the road of contributing to NgRx itself. And I think I tried, I think most of the things I did in, as far as Angular goes, in the beginning was like everyone else. You go try to submit some docs and maybe you see some typos or something. Small code changes, things like that. So that was at least my first real dive into open source.
That's really nice. So you mean so before you went to work with Google, you started? You became part of NgRx. Is it right?
Before I worked on the Angular team doing docs work, we were already like heavily invested with NgRx. Like I said, we started with NgRx Store. It was just NgRx Store at the time when we got involved. So basically, we took it and ran with it. Mike was a lot more freewheeling than I was about making code changes. And then I did a lot of the things around the project, as far as like making sure if we needed to make sure the structure was better, or make sure all the dependencies were updated, so we were staying in line with the version of Angular that was released at the time, or bug fixes, some code changes there. Like I did a lot of that work. And so like I said, me and Mike did a lot of work up front to, try to contribute to the project, because we wanted it to be better, or we wanted it to have more reach so that more people could start using it, of course, because we were wanting to use it. And Rob didn't have a whole lot of time to, do a lot of that maintenance stuff or code contributions, just because of his role at Google.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we got involved when it. You can look back. I looked back at this like a little. I think maybe a couple weeks ago. Looked at the old NgRx store repo to try to see when, like around the time my first commit was. I think it's been at least 5 years ago now
Oh,
that
oh
I
my.
started with the project. So as some things go, we started contributing, and Rob noticed what we were doing, that we were consistent contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like he asked us, do y'all want to come on and have a more active role, on the team? And so
Mm-hmm.
we're like, sure. I mean, we're already doing a lot of the work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we, like I said, we wanted to do it. So we came onto the project, and he added us as members of the team, and then we kind of got things rolling there from with the store, and then we started kind of kicking around ideas about different packages or things that we can move forward with the project. And some of those came and went. Like we had ones that were similar to other Redux packages, like Redux Saga. There was one for NgRx called Store Saga that was similar to that,
Okay.
but ended up not going anywhere with that one because I think the mental model of that idea, we just had a different idea for it. So that was kind of where NgRx effects came from. Is
Ah.
we talked about like how do we want to handle like dispatching of actions, and how do we want to keep how do we want to keep that cycle reactive, basically? Because we had, like I said, in previous projects, we had done the same thing of like we had the action stream, we were subscribing to it in services, and we were just setting up all these subscriptions everywhere. And it's like, well, we could probably set up something to subscribe to those observables, for us, and then just use that as a loop to dispatch actions back to the main store, the global store. So that was pretty much the birth of NgRx effects. Mike did a lot of work on that one, and then like me and Mike have this kind of relationship that we've had for a long time, and me also the other people that I've worked with on different teams. But like I said, we've had this relationship where Mike is more technical than I am, so. I tend to lean towards trying to iron things out for users and trying to make sure that like the APIs are solid, and that what would I look like? What would this look like from a developer point of view, like using this library? So we have that back and forth that we have always gone along with NgRx, as far as having those conversations about how do we have a good mix between like the technical feasibility of a thing and then how users are going to actually use it. So yeah, that was store, and then we got effects, and then from there we just kept it rolling. I think we had store effects, then of course router store came along, and then NgRx entity. Then we had store dev tools. There was another package back in the day that was actually like a built-in store dev tools that you dropped into your actual app as a component. But we ended up not using that one and more or less going for the integration with the Chrome extension, which seemed a lot less invasive, I guess. But yeah, so that was how I got involved with NgRx and kind of moving the platform along. And of course, we've done a lot of things. I could talk at length about a lot of things that we've done as far as like the journey of contributing to it, going from like we did the same thing we did that a lot of people do. You have a lot of packages in a lot of different places, and we're like, well, these packages depend on each other. So we ended up moving everything to a monorepo and trying to get the tooling together so that we could publish all the things at once. But yeah, then like I said, the involvement has always been an ongoing thing of working on NgRx, listening to the community, trying to see what things the users would like to have that we can feasibly do. because NgRx at the end of the day is a community project, open source project that is driven by, a core set of people and then the contributors. So we're always, and we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for the other people on the team and other contributors. So
yeah, I mean, I came to know about NgRx around 2018. So one of my colleague, he just moved to another team from my team, and he started using NgRx. So he actually asked me, "Do you know about NgRx? We are using it." I was like, "Okay, sorry, I don't know about NgRx." He was like, It's really cool package, and it's really awesome." I mean, I could see the advantages. He actually what he was doing in his project. So I was like, okay, I'll most probably try one day. And that day came like after a year. So 2019 was. So
that's
in
how
2019.
that's how it goes. Somebody comes to you with a shiny thing. It's like, hey, you should try this. You're like, great, but I got work to do. I'll try that later.
Yeah. So, but I was once I tried it. I'm in love with NGRX. Uh, okay, so how you got invited to the Google Docs team, Angular Docs team? Sorry.
Yeah. As with most things, I actually did 2 stints on the Docs team. The first time around, it was like I said, I had got involved with the Angular project, trying to, I was more or less contributing to it through GitHub issues and like trying to help things get triaged. And the people who were on the Docs team at the time, I guess part of it also that I would go into issues and I would try to, write a good explanation for, what they were saying, or if I saw the same thing, and try to help out that way. So the person who was lead over the Docs team at the time, name was Ward Bell. And it was me, Ward, and it was a few other people, like John Papa did a stint on the Docs team, Deborah Carrata also, and Kapuna Haley. There was other people also. I can't name everyone, so I won't try to. But so that was my first, like I said, round on the Docs team. And basically, how it works is like you contribute, you go to GitHub issues, you help with people with problems, and people know that, like the people on the team notice that, and then you more or less the door opens and they invite you to the secret room, which is the Slack channel. They invite you to the Slack channel, and then you get more, I guess, inside knowledge of like what's going on and how you can contribute more at that point. So that was how I got involved with the Angular Docs, like I said, the first time around. Then I ended up, the first time around was just part-time. I was just doing it in addition to like my actual job. And then the second time around, it was kind of like the same thing. It was like, hey, we need someone, you've done work on the Docs before. Would you like to continue contributing to the Docs? I was like, sure, because I always like contributing to the Docs. So I was working at my job at the time and still doing Docs work on the side. And then I ended up like transitioning full time to work on the Angular team as a contractor, doing Docs work. So I was definitely, like I said, worked with a lot more people there, different set of people on the Docs team. But like I said, that Docs team was great. Also, the people there that I worked with, I'll name a few of them: Denny and Jennifer, and Shivani was another person. Judy, shout out to all them. Kapuna Haley was on the team still, also. So she's been like a fixture.
Yeah, she just completed 4 years, so she tweeted about it like last week.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but definitely all of them helped. Like I said, me on my stints on the Docs team as a part-timer and a full-timer working there. So that was my stints on the Docs. So I'm going to go ahead and plug the Docs. I'll plug them again later. But if you want to contribute to the Docs, definitely start there. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, plus one to that, I mean, even I started contributing to Angular via the docs. I still do a lot of PR in docs because of course I have a full-time job. I
Mhm.
cannot take a bigger issues, but it's okay. I mean, even you are helping with docs. That's a really great help, because you are helping another thousands or millions of developers by just updating the docs. Yeah, that's good. So what you will suggest to a new developer who wants to start open source contribution? So what will be your uh, suggestions to them?
Yeah. My suggestion to people who've like never contributed to open source, or maybe have only contributed, like I said, something that they consider to be minor, because some people
Mm,
consider docs to be minor, which I don't.
yeah,
Um, but I guess the biggest thing is to just go out there and see what, like, the projects that you use, that, like, there's no shortage of work in open
yeah,
source. There's always a project that you can go and contribute to. So don't think that, um, I guess don't be like me. Don't wait until you think you have everything together or you're the perfect developer or
yeah,
whatever until before you try to contribute to open source, because there's always stuff to be done no matter what it is. There's always docs, there's always testing, code.
yeah,
All those things are part of open source. I would say find your area that you want to find your project in your area that you want to start contributing to,
hmm,
and just like a general rule, see if they have like a contributing guide or something like that. Look at that first, is just so it helps you when you try to go through the PR process. If you looked
yeah,
at that first, like sometimes you just go in, like you said, I'm going to contribute to this, and you start editing files, and maybe they have a certain structure.
yeah,
So definitely check out the contributing guide. Definitely, if the project has good first issues, I will try to look at those first, because some of those are even, like I said, code or testing or docs or whichever. Or so sometimes it's things that they actually are seeking help for that
hmm,
you can go in and do and be more, and they'll be more inclined to, review your PRs and
yeah,
try to get those contributions there. Uh, so those would be my suggestions of how you get started. If you are like unfamiliar with like how GitHub works or Git works, then you I guess it depends on the project, but of course, like on NgRx, we like explicitly say if you need help contributing a PR, that won't help you. If you're not familiar with
yeah,
how GitHub works, that's fine, and we can help you there,
yeah,
because there are plenty of instructions out there. So, like I said, the biggest thing is, I think, mentally, is like getting over the hurdle of, am I good enough to contribute? And like the answer is always yes, you are. So
yeah,
go ahead, and you're gonna bump your head somewhere. So you might as well try to start
yeah,
now, and then because a lot of people, which has always been great for me to see personally, is because there's kind of where I was, it is where I was. You look at something you want to contribute to, you start contributing, and then uh, I guess you gain a level of you get noticed, like, in the community, and
yeah,
then you go out and try to do your own thing and help other people that way, and then you probably end up starting a project yourself, and then like you're starting a cycle all over again for someone else to
yeah.
come in and contribute. So those would be my suggestions.
I can relate. I can relate to that. So yeah. So yes. So plus one to that, because I remember when I started my or opened my first PR in Angular, I was not that comfortable with Git because I always used the Git GUI, and
Mhm.
there was no process, right? In my project, I can just go ahead and check in how many number of commits I want, but they have some rules, so there should be only single commit and all those. But actually, the team members are really helpful. I mean, you already reviewed that PR, and then
Mhm.
Alan helped me with the commands. Actually, I was not aware what to do next. I was stuck. Then Alan said, "Okay, this is the command. Just go ahead and run it." I was like, "Wow, this is cool." And I know. I think I know more GitHub than earlier now. After actually started contributing to the open source. Otherwise, like, the GitHub was like, okay, I just know how to pull and how to push. That's it. That
Mhm.
was GitHub. But yeah, I mean, that's really cool about open source. Okay, so you have been an active maintainer of NgRx as well. So what will be your suggestions to the maintainers of projects? Of course, we now talked about how open source developer can start contributing to it, but what's the other side? How to be a good maintainer of a project?
Uh, how to be a good maintainer. That one is lessons that I've learned myself over time. Um, Being a good maintainer, I think first of all, if you asked me a few years ago, it would have been you got to solve you got to look at all the issues, you got to listen to all the problems, you got to try to fix all the things, and that would be bad advice. And so things as a maintainer is that you look for is to try to try to automate the things that you can so that it'll leave you more time to do the things that you really want to do. Because part of maintaining a project is like the maintenance part of it. Just even in the Angular ecosystem, just staying up to with the latest version of Angular is something that you have to do. So if you can try to automate some of that or make that process easier, then it gives you more time to work on the project. Also, for a maintainer of a project, I would say to stay close to what your vision of the project is. There are always going to be people who use your project and maybe have ideas of what your project should be, but don't, if you know, like with NgRx, we've always had like a focus of like small APIs, simple things, building blocks that other people can build on top of. So in those cases, like if you want to come in and like build something big and like contribute that to the platform, maybe it's not the right place for that. So that's just an idea of stay true to what the idea of what your project is, and because people are going to contribute either way, but you still want to maintain that focus because it helps you not to get derailed as far as other things coming in. Other thing is that I would, as a maintainer, would be to take care of yourself. Like I said, don't think that you have to answer all the questions immediately, or especially for open source projects, because you're using I don't know that there are many projects out there where you get paid to do open source things. Like where I work, NX is an exception there. We get paid to work on that. But I mean, like largely in the community of people who are putting projects out there, taking their own free time outside of work. Just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because if you don't, then the project is gonna languish because you're gonna get burned out on trying to keep up with the treadmill of taking on issues, things like that. So those would be at least some of my recommendations. Stay focused, take care of yourself, and continue to do what you love to do, if that's what you love to do. So
That's really cool. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Brandon. We'll take some questions. As I said, there are a few questions which are from Twitter. So let's take that.
sure.
Okay, so I think the first question is from Avinash. So he says, as a fresher, how to pick project if you have multiple technology working? In my case, I know Angular, Laravel, Titanium. I think you mentioned Titanium, WordPress, Python, etc. I face difficulties to choose projects. So what will be your advice in this case?
As far as my advice for picking like a stack, or
Yeah, he's more onto which stack I should be choosing. I mean, which language. If he's confused, he's also confused between Laravel and Python. So which should one be? I think he's online as well, Avinash.
yeah, I see. I guess it depends on what you want to do with the project. I mean, I always say always bet on the web, because I love the web and web technology. So JavaScript as a foundation is something that you can always lean on to build just about anything with. So unless you have like a specific thing that you want to do, like a lot of people that do machine learning are into Python. I know that. If you're doing enterprise things, maybe Java is the thing that you want to lean into. But in general, like I said, I lean into the web because, the web is just ubiquitous and a platform you can always use. So always, and it's always going to, the web is always going to be around. So you can always find your footing building something on top of that. So that would, aside from me telling you whether to pick React or Angular, I can't make that decision for you because it just depends on a lot of other things that I don't know. So
exactly. Yep.
So yeah.
Okay. So we have one more questions from Twitter. So the question is, really interesting question. Even I want to know the answer for this. So he says, how do you contribute to open source when you are bounded by corporate rat tapism around NDAs, non-competitions, and likewise? So,
wow, that is a good question. Those things, well, yes, I would say you at your job, they have a lot of control over what you can do.
Yep.
But as far as like your open and free time, like they can't stop you from contributing. I mean, like completely, like don't use your work computer, don't use any work communication or work email or anything like that. I would say you have to keep those lines completely clear if you want to contribute to something open source outside of your job, because like I said, most places have a lot of restrictions on if you use your work computer to contribute to that, then I don't know, they have some kind of right to access to that work that you've done or something like that. So, which I think goes into like how open source projects are licensed so that they're protected against those kind of things. Because let's say you introduce a bug into some open source project and you did it on your work computer and then they try to come after your employer or something like that. That's probably an extreme example, but I would say if you want to contribute and you, like I said, have a separate computer that's completely isolated from your work computer, do all your work there, use your own personal email so that there are no ties to your work machine when you're doing open source stuff, if all those restrictions are there.
Okay, but I think there are few organizations where they actually get NDA from you even if you contribute or build something as an open source. They own the rights even though you do it like in your part time or in your free time. So I have heard that.
Okay, I haven't seen that personally, but it sounds like you need to find a different new job. No, I joke, but I'm serious. Like then that's why I said you should keep the lines clear of how you contribute to that project. Because I've like I said, I've been through that before where you have a project that you may have started on work time, so you can effectively take that and then say, okay, now I'm going to put this out in the open for everyone to use. Like that just won't work, especially like government stuff like that.
Yep.
But if you completely start the project outside of work and it doesn't have any involvement with what you do, well, it may have some involvement with what you do in your day job, but if all that work was completely started outside, then I don't see how they can say that that's ours because you work for us. But it's like I wasn't working for you at the time when I wrote the code. I spent my free time doing that. So there's, like I said, maybe a lot of red tape around that. But like I said, keeping the separation there, I think is the biggest key. Even if you have an idea for a thing, like don't commit a line of code on your work computer. Do it all on your personal computer, because then you're protected because you have a trail of, hey, I didn't write any of this at work on work time. It was all on this is my project. So I think that will at least have you covered there. But I'm not a lawyer, so I have to have a disclaimer there. But that's what I've done is even when I've had ideas, I don't do them on work time or work computer, things like that. So
that's nice. Okay, so I think there is another question. A developer's primary skills, findings, and solutions would certainly resolve around their day job. How can someone contribute and not get tangled into the above web? I think the question is more around his personal life and the open source contribution. So,
like I said, the biggest thing you can do is do it on your own time, and like I said, do it on your own time and your own equipment. If you want to take extra steps to protect yourself against that, then if you think it's worth it, then I would say do it. Uh, so yeah, that I don't have much advice for you there outside of do it on your own time, because that's essentially what open source is a lot of people doing their contributing in their own time outside of their normal work stuff.
Yeah. I mean, just to answer this, I mean, I used to contribute like when I don't contribute a much lot now because I mean due to some reasons. But when I started contributing, this is what I used to do. So I used to come from my job, and then after having my dinner, I used to dedicate some time on some issues. So that's how I used to manage it, and mostly on weekends whenever I get some time. But I used to do it daily. So like every day after my dinner time, I'll invest 1 or 2 hours. So that's how I used to manage it.
Yep, I did the same thing. Well, still doing the same thing today. Is after work hours is basically NgRx time. Is either before work hours or after work hours. Contributing to open source projects that aren't directly like tied to work anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take some questions from YouTube. So Shriram has a question. I think you can read it out.
Okay. At any point, have you ever thought about contributing outside the Angular ecosystem? How motivated were you to concentrate only on Angular? I'm always looking at other frameworks to see like what they're doing, but I haven't gotten to a place where I started thinking about contributing to another ecosystem. There's plenty of work for me to do in this one. So I don't really have a reason to divide my time there. Like I said, it goes back to, like I said, focusing on the things that you're like passionate about and things that you want that you have goals and like a vision for. And I can contribute to all the ecosystems at the same time. So like I said, I look at other frameworks like React and Svelte and the other ones that are coming along. But from a contributor point of view, it would still be, if anything, I would be contributing docs because I know it's like something small in their repo or something like that, but not at the point of like actually fully investing in frameworks outside or ecosystems outside of Angular.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, just to add to this, I mean, when I started contributing, I was like really confused. So I did that. I went on to contribute to like Angular. Then I went to contribute to Ionic. Then I contributed to React. Then Microsoft. And then I realized, okay, I really just wanted to contribute to Angular because I love Angular. Then I just came back and I stopped looking at other repos. And whenever I have some work, as Brendan said, right? So whenever, let's say, I'm reading Node. I'm reading some APIs in Node.js. If I figure out there is something wrong, that's the best thing which I can do is raise up docs peer. That's I mean applicable for all the projects. It's not only Angular. In your career, you will find many times that you may have to refer to some documentation because maybe related to work or you are just interested into. I would suggest at least if you think the PR can be improved, just go and raise a PR. It will not cost you much, but it will help others.
Yeah, one project, if I had more time, I would try to contribute more to the Rxjs project, whether it be docs or anything else, because it's like a backbone to a lot of what we do. So, like I said, if I had more time, that would be one project that isn't specific to Angular that I would try to contribute to more.
That's great. Okay, so let's take one more question, and think then we will have one more question, and then we'll end. How should we pick issues if starting newly? I think this is more related to, I think we already discussed about. So in case you are starting as a new developer, so Brandon already suggested that you should look into the issues which are marked as what we call it as, Brandon. So
good first issue.
Good first issues. Then you can start with them. And as Brandon already mentioned, then that you can always ask the team for help, because I have seen in at least in NgRx, there is a checkbox. If you need some help from the team, you can actually they are really happy to help, and that's how you can start. So don't be scared. I mean, even if you think there is some PR where you can do some part and then you need some help from the team, feel free to do that.
Yep.
Okay, so I think this is the last question we'll take, and then we'll end. So
Okay.
Armin has a question. Hey everyone, hope you all are doing well. I've always wanted to contribute to OS, but sometime I just don't know where to start. Is it easier to work on something that I actually use in work? Yep. So your
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's definitely easier to contribute to something that you use and work just because you're more familiar with it. And you're going to, like I said, you may have run into a problem or something like that, or something that was unclear in the
yeah.
docs, as far as like usage goes. So that's something that you can always, contribute back to the project that will help you and help the people that come behind you when they want to use the project. So like I said, like we always say, docs are like the easiest place to start, but they also have a lot of impact on the people that are going to read those docs and not going to run into the same issue you ran into when you started it. So
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, definitely start with something that you use and see if you can contribute there before you try to branch out to just some random GitHub project on the internet that you may or may not have that much interest in.
Yeah. And even I think if you're really good into something, Stack Overflow already has a lot of questions.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Stack Overflow doesn't have any code there, but there are plenty of people who contribute a ton of answers and help there.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I think we will end, Brandon. So last thing before we end. So do you want to promote something? Maybe your blog post. I think you are active on Twitch. So anything you really want to promote?
Yeah, I do stream on Twitch these days. I did a stream yesterday on using NgRx, newly released NgRx component store with NgRx entity because it came up in an issue and I thought it'd be something good to do. So definitely check out my Twitch stream. I appreciate if you, I have to do the whole pitch thing. So if you follow my Twitch there or my YouTube channel and, or even consider like sponsoring me on GitHub, you can find that on my GitHub profile. But I definitely, even if you just watch the videos and give me feedback or even come hang out in the chat, I always appreciate interacting with the users and the anyone who I come in contact with online. So definitely check that out.
And so, Brandon, where people can actually reach out in case they have some questions?
Yeah. So the easiest place would be on Twitter, and I'm Brandon T. Roberts on Twitter, where I try to answer people's questions there. Also have fun on Twitter. So if you see me posting GIFs or just being silly in general, it's on purpose. So I'm there to help and there to have some fun. So, and I talk about at least more or less talk about more serious things there also these days because that's where we are in the world, or that's where we've always been. But I'm leaning a little more into that now. So, so don't be surprised if you see that too.
That's really cool, Brandon. Okay, so hey everyone. I mean, thanks for joining, and special thanks to Brandon for giving his time and coming on to this show and sharing his knowledge with everyone. And please, in case you have not subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and subscribe. We will have 2 more shows this month. So we in next episode we are going to discuss about Angular Universal and pre-rendering. So we will have our guest. His name is Ankit Prajapati. So he's from India, and we'll be talking about Angular Universal and pre-rendering. And then, and end of the month, we have another guest, Armin. He was already in the chat. He already asked a question as well. So Armin will be with us talking about the best practices in Angular. And let's hope. I mean, we'll have a great show again. Thank you, Brandon.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and see you next week on the next stream. Bye.